Gwyneth has created a remarkable business in Goop, and I would argue it is not even on the cusp. It's now broken out as, I think, one of the great lifestyle brands at this very moment. Just to give you an idea of what Goop is and all of the pieces that it touches. There's a content company, podcast, a magazine, TV show coming on Netflix. We're going to be seeing Rhea Hastings in just a minute, live events. There are the wellness products, which you know so well, skincare products, the fashion line, G-Label, the fragrance. There's retail now in LA, New York, London, pop-up stores. And we know it's worth now north of $250 million. Maybe more. You're not even gonna, it's not gonna help. But here's where I wanted to start the conversation. I wanted to start the conversation around when you started this company, and specifically around the idea and the word ambition. Because for many years, it seemed to me, as you were building this company, you hired out a couple other CEOs first to do this, at least publicly. I wasn't sure if you ever really wanted to own the idea of this being this big, ambitious company. And I feel like now you have. And I want to understand what that is and what that was.
Well, I think, as growing up as an actor in the 90s, an actress at the time, we didn't say actor at the time, ambitious was actually a very dirty word for a female actress. Right. So I think we were taught to be compliant and pliable and not to be difficult. And I think if you demonstrated great ambition for a big career, it was looked down upon. And then I did the crazy thing of kind of putting that down and deciding to start a business with great trepidation. And so, yeah, I was ambivalent about my own ambition for a long time. And even as I started to really just create content for the first 5 years before I even thought about any kind of monetization or anything, I didn't think that I had the authority to create a business or to even think my way around it. So it has definitely been a humbling process to embrace my ambition and to really start to feel that being ambitious is actually a beautiful thing for a woman.
But did you always want this? And the reason I ask is, I think there was an interview we saw, Laura Dern. You were on the set with Laura Dern and said to her that you wanted to start a business when you were 25 years old.
I don't remember this conversation, but she swears that it's true. So, yeah.
Did you always know you? I mean, I love this story. You used to read the business section of the New York Times. I still hope you do.
Of course.
Barbarians at the Gate.
Yes.
Was one of the books you used to love.
One of my early business books. Yes.
So where do you think this came from, given that you grew up in a family of people in the arts and in the film and theater world?
Yeah. I always have been very drawn to business. I think it's fascinating and very dramatic in and of itself.
Right.
And so I just always read about it. I always loved it. And yes, you're right. I grew up in a very art-forward household.
But a lot of business people around you?
Yes, because when we moved to New York City, I was born in Los Angeles, and I lived there mostly until I started the 7th grade, and then I came here. And that's when I went to school with a lot. I went to an all-girls school.
Spence.
And
my wife went to Spence.
Yes.
I don't know where she is.
I love her already.
Yeah.
And that's when I started to go to school with the daughters of some very prominent businessmen, and I started to ask lots of questions. I'd grown up, in kind of a hippie school in California with all the parents were artists pretty much.
So when you first started Goop, and I mentioned you had hired 2 CEOs first along the way. So tell me what that was. I wanted to understand, was that you hedging in the beginning because you weren't sure, or because you still wanted to be an actress, or because, what was going on there?
I just didn't know what the fuck I was doing. And so I thought I just needed to outsource everything, and I thought I needed a grown-up and around me to, tell me what to do. And that was a really interesting part of the process, to understand that really nobody knows what the fuck they're doing. And you can learn whatever it is that's specific to your business that you need to learn, and then the more you embody that, the more successful I think the business has the potential to be.
So when did you decide that you actually knew what you were doing?
It still hasn't happened. But it's a process, and I think I'm very comfortable running Goop. I know the business backwards and forwards, and I have, very granular knowledge of the business and very kind of big daydreams about where the business is going. And I think I'm getting well equipped to run this particular company, but
Okay, let's talk about the daydream, because one of the things you've said is that you've compared, at least as a model of sorts, you've talked about Disney.
Right.
Explain that.
I will. So obviously, I'm probably like 0.00001% the size of a company like Disney. But Disney's really acts as a bit of a North Star for me, because when I look at a company that has, first of all, their execution on a brand level is always perfect. They know exactly who their demographic is, and they know exactly how to make their demographic feel incredibly happy, and that what they serve them is very resonant for the demographic. But if you look at the business, it's taken content at the nucleus, and it has all of these incredible lines of business coming out of the content. So obviously, I'm much, much smaller and different demographic and, different goals, but.
Different question, which is, at least up until recently, I would argue people thought of Goop as your company. Mm-hmm. Long term, is the goal for it to be, for you to think about Gwyneth Paltrow and Goop at the same time, or for them to be very separate? And I will tell you, I now talk to young women who talk about Goop, and for better or worse, don't talk about you. I don't know if you think that's a good thing or not.
That's the best thing. That's my dream for the company. I mean, ideally, it would be, its reach and its, impact would be far greater than I could possibly be as, Gwyneth Paltrow. So I think, as you grow a brand, obviously I had the platform. I do have the diminishing platform in that sense, because I'm not, out doing films all the time anymore, far from it.
Okay, so can we talk about that? When you think about, because you're in The Politician.
Yes.
And we've been watching The Politician at home. And you have been in, obviously, these Marvel movies for quite some time. Mm-hmm. How much, in terms of weighing, I know you say you want to get out of, I don't know if you want to get out of the Hollywood business or not, but when you think of that as a platform,
yeah,
right, how important that is in terms of, at least in the immediate term, mm-hmm. growing the business, and how those things balance or not?
Yeah, I mean, I think you sort of have to adjudicate carefully, if you're me, when to leverage yourself for the business and not to in a consumer-facing way, because I really do want the brand to grow irrespective of me, but at the same time, I can be, in certain situations, a really helpful lever to launch something or to amplify something. And by the way, I think it's okay to take the slower route and let the content speak for itself and grow in that way simultaneously. But it's a balance.
So, but how do you do that? Because sometimes I see stuff out there that's coming from you on Instagram and other places, and sometimes I see stuff around Goop that has nothing to do with you. Mm-hmm. And I'm trying to think: Are you sometimes saying, "Oh, I wish that"? What are you thinking?
Well, I'm only one girl. Or maybe I'm not a girl anymore. But I think the idea is to really connect with people using a variety of, touch points, and I don't want to be the only one.
But how much does the platform matter? I mean, one of the things which I'm not surprised by, but, there's still a sort of tabloid culture. You are still very much a celebrity.
Right.
So how important is that, right? When you go down the street, I don't know if you're on your way in here or not, whether you were followed by cameras, I don't know.
There was a guy.
There was a guy? Yeah. There was a guy. So, but do you say to yourself, I want them to follow me, or I don't want them to follow me?
I don't want them to follow me, but I've always had a very ambivalent relationship with celebrity, and I think, look, it is a way to start a brand, right? You have a platform, you have a following, you can launch something on the back of that a lot of times. I think, but the landscape has changed a lot, and I think, especially in terms of celebrity journalism, that's been really disintermediated by social media. So I don't know that one has to rely on that tabloid thing or that, as much as in days past. I'm not really sure, though.
Back to the business itself. How far do you think you can take this brand, and what do you think it represents? And the reason I ask is there's a luxury component to it, clearly, but there's also an effort for it to be accessible.
Right.
And I imagine those things collide oftentimes.
Well, I mean, I don't think of us as a luxury site, and I think we're aspirational. I think we make things of incredibly high quality, and we buy to sell things of incredibly high quality. And I think that, you know, like if you were to take an AOV of a site, like a big luxury site like a Net-a-Porter or a Moda or something, you would find ours was much, much lower. And I think that's because we do sell a lot of beauty and wellness products and things that are, you know, have a more accessible price point. However, we do make and buy things with really good ingredients and really excellent raw materials, and we make really efficacious things. So we're never going to be able to compete with a value proposition or drugstore kind of a price, but I think it's a good thing to aspire. You know, I do. I believe that it's a beautiful quality in the human spirit. And I'm not talking about a price point. You know, I'm talking about buying things that work and that make you feel good, or that make you feel like, you know, you are part of a certain community. And so I hope that as we continue to grow, we continue to democratize wellness. And, you know, it's been interesting over every iteration of the business to watch. You know, we started kind of when I turned on e-commerce with a more expensive, we just sold apparel. And now, you know, as we refine the mission and really hope to impact people's lives positively on the CPG side, you know, I think we are much more approachable and attainable.
Do you think about it as a licensing? I mean, do you think about licensing? Do you think about wanting to own pieces? What's the push-pull here?
Licensing in...
I think you could go into food, for example.
Yes.
When I saw you last, we're talking about food.
We were. We always talk about food.
I could see people buying Goop food at the supermarket. I don't know if that's something you do yourself. I don't know if that's something you partner with.
I think those are all options. I think, you know, one of the great things about having started in all these different verticals is that we have the latitude to go into them and create lines of business around them, but at the same time, you know, you have to focus on what you're doing. So that's a challenge sometimes in the business.
Because you're doing a lot of things. Are there things you ever say to yourself, maybe we shouldn't be doing that?
All the time.
Like what?
You know, I think that there are things when well, it's actually an interesting question because, you know, we spend a lot of money making content and we don't monetize the content. Right. So, you know, you could look at a vertical and say, oh, this doesn't make any money. And, or this, you know, if you were going to get really specific, oh, you know, the people who read this type of content don't turn into a high LTV customer. So is it worth continuing to create that kind of content? I really believe it is, but it's an interesting tension that's created all the time within the business around, you know, what is it okay to lose money on and what is it okay not to lose money on?
I was told that around the company, you guys often say that you do the hard things well and the easy things not so well.
Right.
What does that mean?
Well, we're trying to get better at the basics, but that's what I mean, that we historically, you know, it's very hard to build a brand, as any founder can tell you. It's hard to get traction with the customer. It's hard to build trust and authority. And I think we've done that well, and we continue to do that well. I think it was difficult to create the contextual commerce model, and we've done it really well. I think we actually do it very, very well. But we've done other things just terribly, you know, like...
Like what?
Well, like technology's been a real issue. I think things that for other people are far more intuitive or turnkey have been really hard for us. Performance marketing, you know...
What is the lesson? The other thing I was going to ask you about, because there's been controversy about some of the products that you've sold over the years, and people who say it's pseudoscience. By the way, there's an entire book. Do you know there's an author who's written a book about you?
I do.
You do? Do you know him?
No.
No, okay. But very critical of some of the products, and there were issues at certain points. What's the lesson of that experience? Has it changed the way you sell stuff today? What you get behind, what you don't get behind?
I think, you know, so in the beginning when we were selling third-party products and, you know, we would find some very cool, clean, female-founded brand and be like, oh, we want to sell this, and then we would restate claims that they made on their website that turned out not to have any,
Right.
you know, basis behind them. So those are mistakes that we made early on that we don't make anymore, and we have our own science and regulatory team to vet everything. But then there are certain things that just, you know, I think, especially around female sexuality, it seems to be an incendiary topic for certain people, which I find really interesting.
Because?
Well, I just think that it scares people when women have that kind of autonomy over their sexual health and they're integrated. I don't know why. I'm actually still, it's something that I think about a lot, why culturally there's this resistance to it. But it's amazing, like we can write a piece about, you know, and on any, you know, about women's sexual health, and there's always
And people go
an
crazy.
uproar. Yeah, but we really believe that it's important to be trailblazers, and we are not scared of controversy. We don't want to make mistakes and, you know, restate claims that you can't restate and stuff like that, which, as I said, we don't do anymore. But I think we like pushing boundaries, we like creating conversations, and we also like creating a space where, you know, maybe some of these topics are hard for people to talk about, and by us talking about them, we help eliminate shame in that person's life, and that's super important to us.
You have a number of venture capitalists, I think some of them actually may be here,
Oh,
that have
really?
invested in your company.
I shouldn't have cursed then.
So I was curious, what you think, I mean, at some point they've entrusted you with a lot of money, and they're gonna want to exit, so to speak.
That's what they say.
That's what they say. So how do you think about that over the next, is that a 5-year plan? Is that a 10-year plan?
Yeah.
Do you say, I want to be a publicly traded company? Do you say, I want to sell to somebody else? Do you want to be doing this forever? What's the plan here?
I just really want to go one quarter at a time right now.
Okay.
I don't like thinking about an eventual exit because I think that it limits the scope of what we're doing, and I think it limits the scope of innovation. And I mean, I am sensitive in terms of valuations. Like, I don't want to overvalue us to the point that we could never be acquired. I've watched that happen while I've been building this company. But I don't know, I really love what I do, and I think we're doing something great, and I would like to get it to scale, and so I feel like we have a lot more work to do before I think about that.
Okay, I want to pivot the conversation for just 1 second,
Okay.
if you could.
Yep.
And because it's going to get deep and maybe a little personal for a second.
Oh, dear.
No. I want to talk, if we can, for just a moment about Harvey Weinstein.
Okay,
And the reason I want to do that, and you'll see, because it's actually going to relate to your business in just a second.
okay.
Is that you were, and please give her a round of applause for this, a critical source to some New York Times reporters who really exposed Harvey, and you played a major role in that.
You don't have to clap just because he told you to. I just hope I'm drinking Bill Gates' water.
But the reason I wanted to raise this issue of Harvey Weinstein is that Wesley Morris, who's a columnist at the New York Times, I don't know if you saw this, wrote a beautiful ode to you in the Times recently, and wrote the following, and I want to just read it aloud, and I want to get your thoughts on this. He said, I've spent 2 years wondering whether Paltrow's taste for acting had diminished because of that man, whether having his company seemed synonymous with some of her strongest, most popular work, compelled her to start a company of her own, one where the work concerned not acting, but being whole, being better, being ridiculously better. Did you read this?
You know, I try never to read anything about myself, but so many people forwarded me that lovely, amazing piece that I did read it.
So what do you think of that? I mean, I know that's why I said it could be personal and deep, but what?
I think he said it better than I could say it myself, and there's definitely, it's something that I've been processing over the last year or so, that I don't even think that I was aware that it possibly could have tarnished the way that I viewed my first career until I got involved with Jodie and Megan in the book, and you know, honestly have been still in the process of trying to metabolize what that was and what it means, and I'm not really sure, but I think he's right.
I have sort of a strange Me Too question, which is, I imagine you must have a very complicated view of Harvey Weinstein, given that you knew him for a very, very long time.
Yeah.
How do you feel about him today? No, seriously.
Gosh, I have not been asked this before. I don't like to be binary about people or about things. I think we're all equal parts or varying percentages, light and dark. And I think that, he was a very, very important figure in my life. He was my main boss. He gave me incredible opportunity, and yet, during that time, we had a very, very fraught, complicated relationship, highs and lows. And the postscript to that chapter of my life is where it gets extremely complicated for me, because information came to light about who he was and how he was behaving that I didn't know during my already very difficult time with him. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure how I feel. It's, I know, for me anyway, I like to resist the urge to, be too binary about anything or anyone. And I try to always mine an uncomfortable situation for the life lesson in it.
Well, let me ask you a follow-up to that then, which is, there have been, and because you were a real leader in this, there have been so many other men who've been exposed during this period for wrongdoing. And one of the questions I think that clearly victims of what took place not only need to be acknowledged, and the years of pain that will continue, but what do you think should happen to these men? I wonder. No, but genuinely. Can they repent? Is there something they can do?
I think that I don't think you can generalize. I think that there's a spectrum. But it does seem to me, for the more egregious offenders, that really loss of power is what keeps them from further offending. Right. So if they don't have the power, then they lose that dynamic, and then game's over.
Sort of hard to pivot back to the business.
Let's talk about vaginas.
That is an episode, by the way, of what you're doing on Netflix next, right? That you have a whole thing about women.
We do.
Well, tell us, because we're going to be seeing Reed in a minute.
Oh,
what are we going to be seeing?
I don't know if Reed has seen it. They don't like me to talk about a lot.
Oh, they don't?
No.
Okay.
But it's a 6-part docuseries that comes out in 2020, and we're really excited about it. It's 6 deep dives into Goop subjects that I'm not allowed to say, except you knew that one.
Final. I'm a reporter. Final question. Tell us what's going on with this. There seems to be some kind of back and forth that you've been having with Jeff Bezos. I know that he's one of the few people that you've been trying to reach for a very, very long time. And I gather that he's ghosted you, and I don't really understand what's happening.
Yeah, you win some, you lose some, I had reached out to him. I've learned so much by being brazen and reaching out to people and saying, could I have a conversation with you? Would you mentor me? So he was one of the people that I reached out to, and he never really wrote me back. I tried a couple times, and then I told this story, I think in the Wall Street Journal, and then he emailed me back, and he said, Gwyneth, it's Jeff, and the Wall Street Journal tells me that you would like to get in touch with me. So there begun our very brief conversation, because after that, Yeah, not so much.
Right.
No.
The problem was with the Wall Street Journal. Gwyneth Paltrow, everybody, thank you
you.
so much for the conversation.